Hello, everyone. My name is Carissa Martin, and I completed my presentation on an article pertaining to sex education and pregnancy prevention support for middle school and high school in public education. The name of the article is Support for Sex Education and Teenage Pregnancy Prevention Programs in the United States. Results from a national survey of likely voters. It was published in May of 2020, and I believe that this is important to note because since then there has been an increase in political separation and radical ideologies emerging. This was also before the overturn of Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court, and I believe that this is important because the article provides a description of the study that came to the conclusion in support of 6 out of 7 of the topics covered for sex education and pregnancy prevention. Okay, so the article's name is Support for Sex Education and Teenage Pregnancy Prevention. With that being said, this article covers the study sample, the measures of the study, and the limitations of the study. The topics that are pertaining to sex education and pregnancy prevention, and also the supporting voters and non-supporting voters per topic, which we will go over in the results section. And then it also goes over the difference between a political affiliation and program funding. Okay, to start us off, let's go over the study information. In particular, the participants. There were 965 likely voters included in the study, and out of 1,001 people that were asked to complete the study. The people that were asked to complete the study but did not were not considered likely voters because they did not say that they voted 50% of the time. Likely voters were determined through a Likert scale style question that was phrased around how often a person was likely to vote. In order to participate in the study, they had to answer it with at least half of the time that they were likely to vote. This is important because this may skew the results of the study and it may not represent the whole population of the United States, because we know that not everyone votes 50% of the time and that our voters come out kind of sporadically. And then the participants also had to provide demographic information such as their sex, marital status, employment, race, ethnicity, age, education, and political affiliation, being either Democrat or Republican. The article provides a breakdown of each of these demographic percentages within it. And then it's also important to note that the survey was completed online. So this may also contribute to the limitations within the study because there's no way to prove that the individual that was qualified to complete the study actually completed the questions. So that could have skewed the information. It could also be skewed if the participant was discussing the answers to the questions with another person before completing the survey, and then the other person's opinion affected the answer that was provided to the survey. So those are like the limitations of the study. And then the topics that were covered within the study were puberty, healthy relationships, abstinence, birth control, STIs, including HIV, sexual orientation, consent. All of these topics are relatively normal to be discussed in a sex education course or health course in the public school system. Okay, so next let's go over the results of the study. So 6 out of the 7 topics that I just listed off were supported by a majority of these likely voters on either side of the political spectrum, meaning that no matter if they were Republican or Democrat representing, they supported 6 out of 7 of these topics. So that being said, there was only one topic that was not supported by the majority of likely voters, and that was sexual orientation. Sexual orientation was not supported by the majority due to the Republican support being extremely low compared to the Democratic counterpart. In middle school, for sexual orientation, the Republican side supported it 48.1% of the time, and the Democratic side supported it 83.8% of the time. And then for high school, with a little bit higher support, the Republicans supported sexual orientation being discussed in health classes 63.1% of the time, and then their Democratic counterparts disapproved of it 91.3% of the times. I think it's also important to state that there was a majority of lower support for the topics in middle school to be discussed rather than in high school. And this is important because all of these topics can be gone over in an age-appropriate manner with these children. Whether they're in middle school or high school, there are ways to go over puberty and healthy relationships and abstinence with middle schoolers, and then a way to evolve them to make them more advanced for the high schoolers. And every child deserves that equal opportunity for their education. This chart was pulled directly from the article and provides all available percentages for each topic in regards to Republican, Democrat, and the overall percentage. So pause the presentation now if you would like to look more in depth into the results of the study. Okay, let's get this moved here. Okay, so next we're going to be discussing the application of school social workers. So school social workers can provide guidance and education pertaining to each of these topics depending on the needs of the school. This can be in many different contexts. One of those being that if a student specifically comes to the school social worker for guidance on a personal issue that they're having, whether that be a relationship with a friend, a relationship with a romantic partner, their sexual orientation, the school social worker can provide them with the education and the knowledge that they may need to be able to make educated decisions in the future. Another context that this could happen is if a teacher or an administrator comes to the school social worker and states that maybe there's a class or a cohort that's lacking knowledge on specific sex education subjects, and the school social worker could provide that class or cohort with a kind of training or a presentation that gives them the opportunity to learn the information that they may need to learn. And then it's also important that school social workers can work with the teachers that are teaching the sex education and health classes in our public schools to ensure that the information is being provided is ethically sourced and unbiased by religion and personal beliefs, because since these are kind of taboo topics that aren't likely to be discussed in other classes in public school, it's important to make sure that the teacher's personal bias and maybe religion aren't affecting what's being presented in the class. And then also the social work ethical value of service, because the social work ethical value of service states that we need to help people in need and address the social problem that they are experiencing. So in the context of a student coming to the social worker, we need to be able to provide them with the knowledge that they're asking for. And if we don't have that knowledge, have a way to find it and then present it to them in the right way. And then another ethical value, dignity and worth of a person. This applies to sex education because we need to respect the inherent dignity and worth of a person in the fact that everyone deserves an education and everyone deserves for it to be unbiased and not go off of one single person's religion or beliefs. So that's why we need to be able to work through with the teachers what's being provided and go over the curriculums. And then lastly, my opinion on sex education and pregnancy prevention programs in the public education system is that each of these topics should be covered in sex education classes for both middle schoolers and high schoolers. Each child deserves to have access to the information that they need to succeed. And I believe that a curriculum overview could be provided to the parents of the child so that they could choose whether or not to have their middle schooler participate in the class. And then for high schoolers, I do believe that it should be mandatory for all students to attend some form of a health class or a sex education class, so that they receive the basics of knowledge for sex education and pregnancy prevention. The parents could still be provided with a curriculum overview, so that if they wanted to further discuss a topic with their child at home and discuss their personal beliefs on that matter, they could. But in the terms of the classroom, it's important for in the classroom, text being provided is accurate and unbiased. And here are my references. Thanks for listening.